And let's stick with politics. I now want to bring in Laura Figueroa Hernandez, White House correspondent over at Newsday. Laura, good morning. Great to see you as always. Let's talk first about President-elect Joe Biden talking about his plans to combat the growing health and economic crisis in America. He had a big speech with a lot of CEOs yesterday. What were some of the big takeaways from his speech?
So what we heard from President-elect Biden yesterday was a lot of what we heard on the campaign trail and during the convention. Just this reassuring message that, he understands that Americans are hurting right now. A lot of Americans are, unemployed or wondering where their next paycheck is coming from, but that he wants to invest in the jobs of the future. He understands there's an immediate need right now, but he's also thinking long term in terms of green energy jobs and, boosting the infrastructure. So we heard a lot of that. And as you mentioned, he was joined by a lot of the CEOs and union leaders, and kind of this show of force to show that, perhaps President Trump is not acknowledging his victory, but corporate America is. And so that was an important kind of note for him to take yesterday.
Laura, obviously the big announcement yesterday from Biden was basically almost pleading with President Trump to start this transition process because with coronavirus cases soaring throughout the entire country, there's just not enough time to wait between now and January 20th when he takes over. Do you feel like that pressure will finally get to President Trump and maybe we'll see potentially maybe this week President Trump start that transition process?
I don't know that the pressure from President-elect Biden will necessarily get to him, but I think, as Megan mentioned earlier, perhaps hearing from his own Republican Party, perhaps hearing from his own leaders that they're also acknowledging that the Biden victory is, a done deal. He'll start to understand that maybe his support is collapsing. I think also we've heard a lot from public health officials like Dr. Fauci, a lot of the members of the Biden transition team, the former Surgeon General under the Obama administration. I think perhaps once he understands that his legacy is at stake, and if Americans feel that he's kind of not necessarily paying attention to this pandemic during, this upswing in numbers, if his closest advisors acknowledge that, this can be an issue. If people feel that, as Biden said, you're out golfing and you're not really being a public figure, speaking out about this surge in numbers and the need again to take precautions, then that can look down on you in your last days in office. So I don't know that, again, that Biden will necessarily be the thing that kind of sways Trump. That Trump is Trump, and it's going to be kind of his own thing and on his own time. But I think his advisors around him recognize the time is running out to cement, a good legacy in his final days in office.
Yeah, it's also interesting because it seems like every day more Republicans, it seems like, are coming to terms with the fact that Joe Biden won this election. Jim Rich, the senator from Idaho, had this interesting quote yesterday. He said, going from President Trump to President-elect Joe Biden is like listening to heavy metal music to now listening to classical music. Do you think, almost in a sense, Republicans are now starting to come to grips with this and that they're planning for what a post-Trump life is like?
They definitely are. I think they recognize that this is an administration that they're going to have to work with, right? So it's been a week, 2 weeks after the elections. You can only play this political game so long. Obviously, the Republican Party has become the party of Trump, and so they want to show their loyalty to the president, the current sitting president. But I think they realize that the longer they do that, their own political capital on Capitol Hill will diminish, that they have to, have some sort of acknowledgement that the Biden administration is the administration that they're going to be working with. And I think that's why you're seeing kind of this shift in the language changing, because you can only avoid reality for so long.
So true. Laura, I want to switch gears and talk about Georgia, because there was this crazy bananas interview that the Secretary of State did with the Washington Post yesterday, essentially saying that he's been getting death threats from people. He's been getting a lot of pressure from Republicans, including Lindsey Graham, who apparently called him, apparently inquisitively, according to Lindsey Graham, who just wanted to find out the process of what's happening there. But according to the Georgia Secretary of State, he said Lindsey Graham pressured him to discount legal ballots. Talk a little bit about this and just how unprecedented this is.
Oh, it's completely unprecedented. And I think because of the unprecedented nature of it, that's why you see the Republican Secretary of State of Georgia speaking out against his own party and his own party leaders, knowing that it comes at great risk to him, not only, politically, but his own personal safety, as he mentioned, to let the American public know that this is what's happening. I think it's interesting that he chose, the Washington Post to give that interview to. He didn't, speak about this to a local outlet. He wanted, the nation to know. He wanted to go to a national paper of record to let folks know that, you have just Republican leaders like Lindsey Graham, the chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee, attempting to interfere or, pressure or meddle in some way with the election. It's just kind of a unprecedented and some might say downright dangerous conversation to be having at this point. So I think it's notable that the Secretary of State of Georgia is taking a stand and saying, no, we know what we're doing in our state. We have the mechanisms to audit these votes. We're doing the hand ballot recount, the hand recount, and we trust in our system. And I think it's also interesting to note that they have, there's a Senate election coming in January. 2 Republicans are running against 2 Democrats, and the control of the Senate is at stake here. And I think Republicans on the ground recognize that the more the president and his allies sow distrust in the electoral system in Georgia, perhaps the more likely Republicans are less likely to show up to vote.
Yeah,
so it's like on one, yeah.
I want to talk about that because you're bringing up my next question, and I'm glad you are, because also in the Washington Post yesterday, Robert Costa apparently got a transcript of a conversation between Kelly Loeffler, David Perdue, and other Republican strategists, and they're a little bit worried about this Senate runoff in January, to the point where they're worried that President Trump might be a drag on them. Will all the political infighting cost them votes? Is that a concern for Republicans with that election and the Senate majority essentially at stake there?
Oh, definitely. I think I think their own words acknowledge that there is an issue. Obviously, President-elect Biden won Georgia, and he's winning by a substantial amount. So there's that concern. There's the concerns about just a changing demographic in Georgia. So those are already numbers that are perhaps leaning against the Republicans running currently, the Republican incumbents. And now you have the president kind of showing distrust in the electoral system, questioning the company that's behind the precinct machines, the voting machines. And so all this could lead to kind of like this perfect storm that would backfire against Republicans. So I think they realize that, okay, we need to change the tone here. We need to do something different, because things could, look downright ugly in January for Republicans if they don't win these 2 seats.
Yeah, Laura Figueroa Hernandez, White House correspondent at Newsday. Great insight as always, Laura. Thanks so much for coming on.